21 section 2 today, still on the subject of supply and demand, and once more the big theory here is that supply and demand in a market interact with one another, and that is how price is determined. So in a free market economy, since price is a variable, since supply is a variable, then we've got to think about this in terms of how price relates to demand. And there's a couple terms we need to understand today. Number one, demand elasticity. It's a fancy term that if you go into business you need to know. Again, substitute and then complement. How do these fit into economic decisions? First question is, do you think that people should wait a certain period of time before making a purchase? I don't know about you, but I do this almost instinctively. If it's something big, I'm going to obsess about it. And so several different factors can cause market demand for a good or a service to change. So what can affect demand? We already know that price certainly affects demand, but what else can affect demand? So demand changes over time for a product due to many different factors. For example, if more consumers enter the market, there's going to be more demand. You see, right now, none of you guys have heard of Confluence Manufacturing out of Greenville, South Carolina, because the market base, the number of consumers of whitewater kayaks, is very small nationwide. Mine's still considered a fringe sport, and that's okay. I like it that way. But if suddenly you guys all got super excited about whitewater kayaking, then the number of consumers in that market would grow, and that would affect demand for that product. When they make the latest and greatest new model, they understand that a limited number of consumers will buy their product. So, other changes that can affect demand. Well, if your income goes up, yay, congratulations, you got your first grown-up job. What are you going to do? Well, you're probably going to want a new car. Yay, everybody wants a new car. What else are you going to want? Well, probably going out to eat more. You know, I've been broke college student. I've lived on, broke college student rations. When I got grown-up job, I was like, sweet, I'm going out to eat all the time, and now we're regulars at our local Mexican restaurant, and that's where we've settled, and we're really happy with that, and that's something that our income affects. When we get a raise, we go out to eat more. When we're struggling, we go out to eat less. And so finally, expectations. Expectations affect demand. If the Switch is coming out now, well, it better be good because its competition is pretty fierce. Now, the Switch represented a new niche, meaning that it's a hybrid device. It can be both a console and a mobile gaming system. So it's a relatively new phenomenon. But that also puts it in two different markets. It has to compete with the console market, which in terms of hardware, it's way behind on. And it has to compete with the mobile gaming market, which it's really kind of ahead of the game on. But since it's in both fields, well, expectations are rather high. Next, prices of related goods can change. Okay, so there's the Switch and there's the 3DS. They're both very excellent gaming systems. They both have an impressive library of games that go along with them. And so since the 3DS is admittedly cheaper right now, that is going to affect demand to some degree. The beauty of this is that it can all be predicted and analyzed. And that if you're a good business person, you have to know how to do this. That's why if you plan on going into any kind of business, you need to go to business school. You need to learn how to track market demand through a curve. I gave you a simple project, the supply of the jelly donut thing. You guys got an intro to that. But if you really want to do market research particular to your line of business, you use the same methodology. Okay. Changes in population can affect demand. More consumers obviously means higher demand. The larger the population of our country, the better farmers will do in terms of the agricultural sector, because we buy most of our food Indigenously, most of our food comes from this country. Ergo, the larger our country, the more food we need. That's a simple one. Same with gasoline. Population of nations affects demand and gas prices. When more people in China are driving, the price of gas goes up. When the global economy goes down, the price of gas goes down because demand goes down. Fewer consumers means lower demand. You know, yesterday in world history I was teaching about the bubonic plague. It's a really creepy thing. The Black Death killed tens of millions of people, really hundreds of millions of people globally. And we have this, economists are the way they are, and they've studied the Black Death. Of course, we all get that it was creepy, it was terrifying, hundreds of millions of people are dying, but economists looked at it in terms of market factors, and what they realized was that suddenly workers were in an all-time high of demand. And that because of the Black Death, wages went up. Yes, wages went up. Why? Because if you're living in a little medieval village and the town blacksmith and his apprentice and his son, you get the picture, and they're all dead, the market demand for a blacksmith is at an all-time high. If you want to be set for life, go be a blacksmith where all of them are dead because of the bubonic plague. So anyway, fewer consumers means lower demand. This can also be affected by immigration. Yes, when folks come into our country, they have to eat just like everyone else. And so that affects the value of food and the demand on food. They've got to drive cars too, and so that affects the price of gasoline. They also have to work, and that affects the labor pool. All of these factors can be affected by population change. Right now, our country is experiencing a post-World War II phenomena of it's called the graying of America. That is, that people are living longer, we're having fewer babies, ergo our population is older than it ever has been. What does that mean? Well, that means in Brevard that the Blockbuster went out of business and they put a dialysis center in its place. I mean, that's what that means. You know, what does that mean? That means that smart business people are realizing the demand for products and services that benefit the elderly. And so if you really want to be a savvy business person, think of a product or service that will benefit elderly people in Henderson County. Boom, that's the money right there. Changes in income certainly affect things. High wages give people a higher level of discretionary income. Low wages give people less money. So strong economies result in booming businesses that serve luxuries. Strong economies will see a rise in jewelry, in luxuries, new cars, fancy electronics, etc., etc. iPhones are being marketed, the latest and greatest iPhone is being marketed to a population that can afford the expenditure of the latest and greatest. Also changes in taste. You know, what we have to realize is that you can actually create a demand for a product. You know, if any of you have been scrolling through your social media feed and you see an ad for something you've never heard of, but you start to see that ad more and more and more, and suddenly you begin to want that thing. I've been guilty of it. You see, marketing today is extremely clever. You know, advertising companies gain access to your browser histories and they use that information to target you particularly. And so if you've been looking up cool journals, you probably see ads in your social media for cool journals. If you've been looking up stuff about the Switch, I bet your news feed is full of stuff about the Switch or video games or whatever. And mine is. I mean, even when I'm looking up like how to get through this stupid puzzle on Zelda, it's recording that I'm looking at that, and it's already figuring out what to sell me next. The internet knows I bought Zelda somehow, and they know that I would probably buy a game related to Zelda, so they started sending me Skyrim stuff. Well, what did I do? I eventually bought Skyrim. It's cool. I started having to Google like how to solve this Skyrim puzzle, like what to do with this thing, where do I put this dragon, whatever. And suddenly, there's a higher utility for that game where I'd never even heard of it prior. But guess what? Popularity fades over time. You know, right now in mobile gaming, Fortnite is pretty up there. But guess what? It's got its moment in the spotlight, and we as a people will be over it soon enough. When I started at the early college, kids were obsessed with Clash of Clans. They pressured me into getting it. Okay, I started playing it. 2 years later, I was over it, as were most people. Most of us have moved on with Clash of Clans. Now people are on to Fortnite. Guess what? In 2 years, you guys will be super seniors. The incoming freshmen will be like, oh, Fortnite, that's so stupid. You know why? Because popularity fades over time. It's just one of those laws of economics. Finally, change in expectations. Knowledge about future products affects demand. I knew that when I bought the Pixel 2 would come out within about 9 months. I knew that. I knew this sucker would become obsolete within a couple of years. And that did kind of knock the excitement out of it to some degree and will certainly affect future buying decisions. Global events can influence demand. Guess what? When a Democratic president is elected, anybody want to guess what market sees a huge surge in popularity? Guns. When a Democratic president is elected, gun sales go up significantly. If you want to make a smart investment, if it appears that a Democrat is going to win in 2020, invest in guns. Buy some stock in Smith & Wesson. It's almost a sure thing. Worry about future events influences demand on certain products. You know, if we're going to go into a war, I mean, God, I hope not, but if we go to war with Syria, like I think it'd be terrible, but anyway, if we did, buy stock in Halliburton. Who's Halliburton, you say? Oh, they're a military contractor. They're mercenaries for hire, basically. And they're one of the primary groups that we use when we don't have soldiers to deploy. So a lot of the folks in Iraq right now are private contractors. So if we go to war, buy stock in Halliburton. It's a pretty safe bet. Worry about future events affects demand. But also product-related changes. Anybody ever have a favorite restaurant who changed their menu or changed the way they made a thing and now it's no longer your favorite restaurant? I mean, hey. Like, for example, restaurants, to avoid raising prices, will often either change ingredients or reduce portion size over time. They do this so they don't have to raise prices. But that affects quality, and that can affect demand. But also changes in substitutes. Substitutes are competing products that consumers can use in place of another. If the competition comes out with a better product, then you're less likely to buy the product that you had once used. You know, when I started teaching, I know it was a million years ago, the iPhone had just come out. It was the smartphone. It was the only smartphone. If you wanted a smartphone, you bought an iPhone in 2007. Otherwise, you had the brick. Well, I was stubborn. I stayed with the brick. I used my non-smartphone. Why? Because the price of the iPhone was too much. It was more than I was willing to pay. However, over time, Android has arisen to be a viable competition. And so, since Android's gotten so amazing, that eventually influenced my purchase. Whereas in 2007, I bought the fanciest iPod because I wanted a way to listen to my music. So I bought the fanciest one I could find. I don't even need an iPod anymore. This thing has all my music on it. Yay. So, as price of a product goes up, demand for its substitute will also go up. So when the iPhone 7 was released, it was nearly $1,000. The iPhone 8 is now what, $1,000? Somewhere around there? Is it still $800? Okay. I guess you can get the fancier version with more storage or whatnot. Basically, if you get the tricked out one, it's going to be pushing $1,000. Well, guess what? You can go buy LG, decent phone for $200. So that's the real question. Do you want LG decent phone for $200, or do you need latest and greatest? And your decision there will be partly affected by price. And what economists can measure is that the higher the iPhone gets, the higher the demand for LG decent phone gets. But also changes in complements affect demand. That is a product that is used with another product. So when I bought the Pixel, I understood that it wasn't waterproof. Had I known the next generation would be waterproof, maybe I would have been patient. But I wasn't, so I didn't. Well, that meant that in order to have a waterproof phone, I had to buy a life-proof case. Well, the life-proof case for the Google Pixel, for me, was an essential accessory. And so the life-proof is a complement product, meaning that if I didn't have the Pixel, I wouldn't be buying the life-proof. So computers and software are an excellent piece. When I bought the Switch and the internet realized that I own a Switch, it now tries to sell me games for the Switch. It wants me to give... Lately, it's really been pushing Xenoblade. I've never even heard of it, but it's probably just going to push it, and I'll finally give it a try. So again, that's a complement product of the Switch. So as demand for the Switch goes up, demand for its software will also go up. Now, the beauty of this is these things can be tracked. That folks who are making Xenoblade Chronicles are looking at Switch sales. Should they make a sequel? Should they release the sequel? Should Doom 2 be ported to the Switch? Is it worth the time and effort to do it? Well, they're going to look at Switch sales to make that decision. Next, elasticity of demand. This is something important. Demand elasticity is the extent to which a change in price causes a change in quantity demanded. So, demand elasticity means that if the change in the quantity demanded, to what degree does that influence price? So, we know that demand affects supply. We know that demand affects price. But to what degree? Does one more consumer raise the price by X amount? Does 100 more consumers raise the price by X amount? If Switch sales go down by 50% this year, to what degree will that affect the price drop? I'm sure you guys have heard about the drama related to the Wii U. Wii U sales were far lower than projected. That means the price drop happened much sooner and was far more significant. So causes of elastic demand. Number one, attractive substitutes. If the Switch had serious competition, there would be fewer of them sold. Also, do you have the ability to postpone a purchase? Do you need this new phone? Does everyone need this new phone? Or is it something that everyone could choose to wait on? You see, some demands are inelastic. The example I love to use is medicine. Did you guys know that the price of an EpiPen recently skyrocketed? So if you are in a situation where you have to carry an EpiPen, it's now far more expensive. Was there anything that you can do about it? If you have a deadly allergy to bees and you don't get that EpiPen, you will die. Bottom line. EpiPens expire, ergo you've got to buy one of those things probably every year. So the price of them went up from, I don't know, less than $100 till now they're way more than $100. Well, here's the thing. The really crappy part of that is that you don't have a choice. What, you're going to not buy one and risk death? That stupid bee that's under our school is going to get you and you will choke and not breathe and you will fall over and die. Or pay $150. That's called inelastic demand. Demand for luxuries are always more elastic than demand for necessities. You see, if the price of milk goes up, I'm still going to buy milk. Got to have my cereal in the morning or I'm not happy. To me that's a necessity. Or the price of gas. I have to drive. I live 16 miles from here, so I have to drive to get here. The price of gas will not change that. And so that's inelastic demand. I mean, relatively. If it goes up too much, I'm riding my bike, but whatever.